There is a version of you that only shows up around one specific person. Quieter, more careful, watching your own words before they leave your mouth, laughing a half second too late because you were busy calculating whether the joke was safe to make. You don't do this around everyone, just them. And the more you want them, the smaller you get. Nobody talks about what wanting someone actually does to you, because it's uncomfortable to admit out loud. Sometimes, wanting someone stops feeling romantic to your nervous system. It starts feeling like something you cannot afford to lose. The moment you decide someone matters more than the average person in your life, your brain can quietly start treating their attention as something you need to protect. And anything your brain believes it cannot afford to lose gets watched, monitored, protected. You start thinking, don't mess this up, don't say the wrong thing. Don't make them lose interest, don't give them a reason to leave. And suddenly, you aren't just talking to them anymore, you're performing for them. This is why you rehearse texts to someone you want, and never rehearse texts to someone you don't. Not because the second person matters less as a human being, because the first person's opinion has become expensive. Every message feels like a tiny test. Every pause feels like information. Every change in their tone becomes something your brain wants to investigate. And that's where the trap begins. Because wanting someone more doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how you move, how you speak, how much of yourself you're willing to risk showing. The stranger on the street could think anything about you, and it costs almost nothing. But the person you want? One flicker of doubt from them, and suddenly your entire body notices. You become more conscious of yourself, more careful, more agreeable, more aware of how you're being perceived. And the strange part is, you think you're becoming better at attracting them, but you're actually becoming less like yourself. And here's where wanting someone can become its own trap. The more you convince yourself that this person is rare, the more your brain starts treating their attention like something you have to earn. So, you become more available, more agreeable, faster to reply, more willing to overlook things you normally wouldn't. You think you're showing interest, but underneath it, you're trying to make sure they don't leave. And people can feel the difference. Interest says, I want you. Fear says, please don't stop wanting me. They look almost identical from the outside. But they create completely different versions of you. One is open, the other is performing, one is choosing, the other is trying to secure an outcome. And the more you try to secure the outcome, the more every interaction becomes a test you're afraid to fail. Here's the cruelty of wanting. The feeling itself isn't the problem. The vulnerability underneath it isn't the problem. The problem is what fear can make you do with that feeling. The over-texting, the over-explaining, the constant checking, the disappearing personality, the sudden willingness to agree with everything they say, the way you start editing yourself before they even ask you to. You think you're protecting the connection, but sometimes you're slowly deleting the person they were attracted to in the first place. And this is where things get even deeper. For some people, this goes deeper than attraction. If approval once felt conditional, if being accepted depended on saying the right thing, behaving the right way, or avoiding disappointment, you may carry that sensitivity into adult relationships. Then, wanting someone doesn't just feel like attraction. It can feel like an audition. You aren't simply asking, do I like this person? You're unconsciously asking, will they choose me? Am I enough? Did I say the wrong thing? Are they losing interest? And suddenly, you're not experiencing the relationship. You're monitoring it. You're watching their face, their replies, their tone, their availability, their attention. You're constantly searching for evidence that you're still safe. And that's why the version of you that wants someone the most is often the version that performs the hardest. And the version that performs the hardest is rarely the version that feels the most magnetic. Not because you weren't worth choosing, but because fear changes the way you show up. And here's the part almost nobody wants to hear. The forbidden part isn't a secret technique. There isn't a perfect text. There isn't a manipulation you can use. There isn't a psychological trick that makes someone suddenly chase you. The uncomfortable truth is much simpler. The person you're trying hardest to impress may be seeing the fear underneath the performance. They may not consciously know what they're seeing, but they can feel that something is different. You're responding faster, agreeing more, trying harder, watching their reactions, seeking reassurance, and somewhere beneath all of it, you're communicating something you never intended to say. Your response matters more to me than mine does. And that's when wanting someone can quietly become losing yourself. Because the calm, effortless version of you that people find magnetic isn't necessarily some fake play-hard-to-get persona. It's often simply what remains when you're not terrified of losing the outcome. That's the part people misunderstand. The solution was never, want them less. It was never, play it cool. And it definitely wasn't, pretend you don't care. The real shift is learning to want someone, without your nervous system treating the wanting as an emergency. Because the moment wanting stops feeling like scarcity and starts feeling like simple preference. I'd like this, but I'm not starving without it. Everything about how you show up changes, not because you stopped caring, because you finally stopped performing the caring for an audience that was never actually asking you to. And that's when something strange happens. You stop rehearsing every text. You stop measuring every pause. You stop trying to predict their reaction before you've even finished speaking. You start saying what you actually think. You start noticing whether you even like the way they treat you. You stop asking, how do I make them want me? And start asking, do I actually want this? That's the moment the power shifts. Not because you've learned how to control them, because you've stopped needing to. Think about the last person you wanted the most. How much of yourself did you actually let them see? And how much of it was a version of you calculated to be kept? Because sometimes the person you're trying hardest to make them want is the exact person you're becoming least like. And maybe that's the part nobody tells you. The version of you they would want the most was never the one working the hardest to be wanted. If this changed the way you understand your own wanting, subscribe to Mind Draft X. Because sometimes the most dangerous psychological trap isn't getting rejected, it's becoming someone else, just to avoid it.